Hello, my name is Lesley Atherton. This is a piece of fiction stroke non-fiction. It's basically a true story that's been fictionalised. Names and places have been changed. I am so blessed. I've experienced a loved life, crammed with happiness, creativity, challenges and contentment. And I have much to look forward to, despite the intense difficulties of the last few years. Nevertheless, as an adopted person, something has always been missing. Some not so tiny piece of the jigsaw of who and what I am or might have been. It can't be labelled. Perhaps it's partly knowledge or an instinctive awareness of heritage, or perhaps it can more accurately be defined as a genetic link with the past. I don't know. But ask most happily adopted children and they will likely say the same. Life is good, but underneath the surface there's always something niggling at you and beckoning you in, enticing you with its twin angel charms of curiosity and longing. Curiosity is a devil to quell, but I managed to put a lid on mine for most of my 49 years. I booked this week-long holiday in Anglesey way before my mum died. Having visited a great many Welsh areas, both rural and urban, and having lived briefly in Cardiff, I'd always shied away from the West Coast as I simply wasn't ready for the potential intensity. But this time, I was ready, and I wanted to mop up the atmosphere of the place where my birth family had lived. I wanted to walk the roads that they'd walked. This trip was all about getting grounded in a place, and perhaps allowing that grounding to tie up some loose ends within my psyche. Hence this writing. But what began as a personal travel journal of a holiday, a journal in which I'd write of places I'd been and things I'd seen, very speedily became something else. It became a write-up of something extremely special. When my writing group set us all an assignment to write of a gateway to another world and a time-stroke place imbued with a wonderful atmosphere and fateful events, you would understandably expect the writing produced to be works of fiction, but this week's piece from me isn't make-believe. It is real, true and profoundly human. It may not be a work of fiction, but it is certainly a work of fate. I'm in an unnameable village on the Isle of Anglesey, one of the most atmospheric and beautiful areas of Wales. I arrived on the 3rd of September 2010 to visit a large pub just out of the village. We arrived a full 2 hours early, despite selecting the most scenic and lengthy of routes. The weather was dire and dark, and I was restless and overexcited. Nevertheless, this tiny Anglesey village has become my personal atmospheric window to another world. This place is special. This entire holiday has been special. Please bear with me while I explain. On our first full day on holiday in Anglesey, we'd driven past a museum. We weren't sure we had enough money in our pockets to pay for the entrance fee, and we did have other places to visit too. But on our journey back, we pulled into their car park. The place would usually have been closed for the season, but they had arranged to have some decorating work done, so the management decided to stay open another couple of weeks. I'm glad they did. Fate factor 1. Having spent a fortune earlier in the day, I only just had enough money, £21, to pay for us all to go into the museum. Fate factor 2. Ending up with only 32 pence left in my purse. Uncharacteristically, this lack of funds didn't deter me as it might usually do. We went in because I was determined to. While the children were transfixed by a few of the more interactive exhibits, a chance crossing of paths with a woman who worked there led to one of the most enriching experiences of my life. She was walking round, locking up a few of the rooms. We got talking, and after about 15 minutes of general chat about the museum and area, she asked what had brought us to Anglesey. I explained that my family heritage was rooted in the area, and that I was visiting to get a sense of the place, rather than to seek out people. She was interested in finding out more, so, me being me, I told her that I was adopted, and that my birth mother had lived at 67 Perseverance Row. This lady told me that she was called Angela, and that she knew 67 Perseverance Row extremely well, as her daughter currently lived there. Fate Factor 3. Can you imagine? I had so many questions to ask. Yes, she knew of Diane and Gwyneth, my birth mother's two younger sisters, and she knew a little about my birth family. I hadn't intended to investigate my roots this way, but when Angela spoke to me, it was clear she believed I should seek further information while I was in the area, because fate had brought me to this small place in Anglesey and to her. Angela recommended that I call round to speak to her daughter before I did anything else, so the following evening I called at number 67. The door was opened by an older man who introduced himself as Mr. Marks. Angela wasn't at home, but Mr. Marks was able to tell me that both mum and daughter would be doing voluntary work at the museum the following day. I left a little card with my contact information and planned to return to the museum the following day. We met Angela and her daughter and ate some of the museum's homemade scones. Then I mooched around the gift shop, buying many items, including the usual museum fare, pens, pads and cups. While we chatted, Angela looked through her laptop in an attempt to find a photograph that had been posted online on the back doorstep of number 67. We didn't find the photo that afternoon, but Angela encouraged me to join the local Facebook group. I did so once we returned to our holiday cottage. Once my application to join the group was accepted, I scrolled through the group pages looking for that photograph Angela had mentioned, and realised some photographs of a woman with the same name as my birth mother had been posted. Fate Factor 5. The woman who posted the photos was able to give me some more information too. She and another local group member knew my birth family well, and one of them contacted a very special person without my knowing. He was my uncle and soon messaged me. After exchanging a few messages, we arranged to meet at a local pub on a day of windy downpours and grey skies. It was a few miles away, and the weather lent a slightly depressing air to the place, but nothing could squash my spirits. I was excited, nervous, apprehensive and concerned, both that I'd be a disappointment to my family and that they might not believe I was who I claimed to be. However, another concern was more pressing. I had begun with a nervous cough. My logical thinking was that if I could find a small supermarket, I could buy cough sweets. So, after driving around for a little while, we found a spa. I left the rest of the family in the car, and we walked through the shop's front doors. Special times were ahead. As I entered the shop, a smiling, white-haired, bushy-bearded man gave me the biggest and most glorious grin I had ever experienced. My uncle had told me the previous night that he looked a bit like Santa, so it obviously did cross my mind that it could have been him. But I was sceptical, as we'd already experienced far too many coincidences. I put this beaming smile down to the wonderful friendliness of the people in this part of the world and walked on. But when I turned around to check, I saw him talking to a lady who totally matched the description he'd given me of his wife. Fate Factor 6. It must have been him, especially as he seemed to know me too. We looked at each other from about 20 paces away, and he raised his hand in a wave of acknowledgement. I did the same, and we walked towards each other as I said, "I think I know who you are." He held out his arms to hug me, then introduced me to his wife. How could I not warm to both of them right away? Their easy conversation, genuine amazement, affection and openness were refreshing, and there was no hint at all of discomfort or any lack of a welcome. We chatted for a little while, but not for too long, as they had shopping to do, and I had left my family outside in the car. My uncle pointed out to me where the cough sweets were, and we said our temporary goodbyes. I was glowing when I returned to the car and said, "Guess what just happened to me?" It had just been one of those serendipitous weeks. I arrived at the pub a little early, after sending the family off to do their own thing. My children aren't great at displays of real emotion, and my eldest didn't want to see me cry, bless her soul. Not long after I sat down, my uncle and auntie arrived, and we chatted as if we already knew each other. I was nervous and overwhelmed, but so comfortable with them. Another uncle arrived with more warm hugs and genuine smiles, and a little later another auntie joined. More warmth, questions, smiles, answers, connections. My partner said later that when he first saw this final auntie, he couldn't quite believe our similarities. That was nice, but personally I could see little bits of me in everyone there. And that, for someone who had never experienced it before, was quite wonderful. Later, after lots of talking and showing of photos and clearing up of facts I wasn't sure about, another relative came in. It didn't take long to get a hug and a "hello, cuz." I was welcomed by every one of them. Can you imagine what that must feel like for someone who no longer has family? It felt pretty amazing, I can tell you. Before we split up, we had a group photo taken, given that I seemed to already be accepted as part of the family. Nobody asked to see my birth certificate or any proof that I was who I claimed to be. To them, I was already accepted. I had to be related because of the family likenesses, mannerisms, and even the way I held my hands. Not to mention the fact that my uncle knew that my birth mother had given up a baby for adoption, that the baby would be my age, and that the baby had been given the same name as mine. At the time of writing, there are other family members to be told, and I'm aware that this might cause conflict, upset, and feelings of betrayal and sadness, but I genuinely believe some good will come out of this in time. It has to. Only that one uncle had known of my existence beforehand. I discovered he used to visit my birth mother in Cardiff when she was pregnant with me. To meet someone who knew me as a bump and also as a baby when my birth mother was trying to keep me was very special indeed. These magical places have been unintended gateways to a delightful group of people. And for me at this point in my life, that is the most magical thing possible.